welcome to Inside the 90, the podcast where we talk about what it's like to go from pains to gains by choosing to live in a 90-day world of EOS. I'm Jami Mullikin, your host, and today we've got Bryan De Bruin with VanRock and Andrew Gissal, fellow entrepreneur and EOS Implementer.
Yeah, really excited to be here, so thanks, Jami.
Thank you.
And I'm even more excited to just sit down and talk with Bryan a little bit about the journey of VanRock and EOS aspects of it, yes, but I'm pretty familiar with that side of it. We get in a room every quarter and go through your priorities and kind of dig in. But what I don't get a lot of time to do with you is just kind of riff on the journey and how it's been and some of the things you may be challenged with today and lessons learned kind of along the way. So maybe just kind of kick off about the ideation of VanRock as one of the co-founders. Where did the idea come from, and we can kind of move from there.
Absolutely. So I appreciate you guys having me. So prior to forming VanRock, I think going back a little bit before that, I was a real estate attorney. I still am a licensed attorney, but I owned a law firm in town. So most of my clients were buying and selling businesses or buying and selling real estate. And that was my focus, and we built that practice, and it was thriving and it was doing very well. And I actually had probably from a success standpoint, my best year. And every year I set goals, and this year I, exceeded those goals. But I wasn't very happy. So I sat down with my wife, and we had, what I would consider to be an EOS type quarterly conversation without really knowing about it. Mm-hmm. And what I wanted to do wasn't running a law firm. So we set out at that point in time to do what I wanted, which was to develop real estate and to build more of a real estate private equity company. So I started that on my own. I launched a couple of funds, had some key partners in that, and I saw success. That success gave me the confidence to really take the full step and leave the firm full time and go off on my own. At the same time, I knew that there was still a lot I needed to learn in the space, specifically on vertical construction. And I went and found a partner, and I would say my journey to finding a partner was a little different than most. A lot of times you see friends become partners. Stan, my partner at VanRock, we knew each other. We were acquaintances, but we weren't friends. We had a respect for each other, and I was talking to actually his attorney at the time about my plans and what I wanted to do, and he said, you should sit down with Stan. I just had a conversation with him. It sounds very much like what he wanted to do. So about 3 years ago now, we got together, and in one setting, we mapped out a business plan, where we wanted to go, where we wanted to take a company that we hadn't formed yet, and how we wanted to get there. And from there, we formed VanRock. So it's been about 3 years now, and it's grown. And it's been successful. It's been a ride, though. It's been a good.
Yeah. And when you look at that, part of the business plan right in the beginning to form the auxiliary entities along with that?
It was. So from a cost saving standpoint, my experience in the merger and acquisition space, I had, the fortunate aspect of working for but getting paid to learn from really successful businessmen and women. And one of the things that they always impressed upon me is you need to control your supply chain. So, for example, one of my mentors created and owned and then eventually sold a construction supply business. He started in the tile space, and then he went to floors, then cabinets, and by the end, he was supplying every national home builder with everything that goes inside the home. His model was anything that's inside the four walls of the house, I want to be the supplier of. And he kept building on that, and then he bought the manufacturing site overseas. So now he was his own manufacturer, and then he bought the distribution side, and then he rolled it all up and eventually sold. From a private equity and a real estate equity component, one of the things that I always saw as a challenge was if I have a property manager in each market that's different, now I'm just, exacerbating my vendor list that I have to deal with. If the maintenance companies that I'm working with are different in every market, now I'm beholden to their business plan and their business ideas. So when Stan and I got together, it was an idea of we have enough scale and we have enough units from a portfolio standpoint that we should have our own maintenance company. We should have our own property management and asset management company. We should be able to develop our own real estate from a horizontal standpoint, and then we should be able to build from a vertical. And then how do we get there on all of that? And what does VanRock's role look like? That was, it was more than one cup of coffee for us to get there, but that was the plan.
Yeah.
And that when y'all first started, did y'all even talk about roles and responsibilities and who's doing what?
Yes. And so we did not hit on it enough. There was a lot of stuff that we didn't know from a business standpoint. From a real estate standpoint, I think we were both there. He had been in the business buying, selling, building, and real estate for about 10 years beforehand, but he was kind of a solo entrepreneur doing it with himself and maybe a few key partners here and there. He hadn't grown a company. And then from the law firm side, law firms operate a little differently than most companies go. The pecking order and the dynamic is based on, who's a lawyer and who's not necessarily what role makes the most sense. So I don't think that we had a very good grasp at that moment of what a business takes, really from like an HR and employee and who's doing what perspective. But, the unsaid agreement between us at the time was that I would run the back office, he would be forward facing. And we quickly learned that was not the right approach for really what our skill sets. So I think it probably took us a year until we got with you that we sat down and we went through a couple of, lessons and, what is it that we want? What is it we think? And we really started to hammer out whose role was going to be what. And that role switched about a year ago now.
There's so much to unpack there. Just think about this journey, right? As an entrepreneur, we're all entrepreneurs here. So the idea of stepping away from a good practice, starting something, bringing on partners or a partner, and then standing up 4 or 5 entities at one time. So that's a lot, right? So when you did that, how did you start all the entities overnight? Or was there a gradual approach that you guys took? Walk us through a little bit of that journey.
Yeah, so we went and we created a list of what do we need to prioritize from a vendor standpoint? Where are we most vulnerable? And when I look at a vendor, there's always great relationships. If I hire you to do something, there's a value that I'm going to gain and an expertise that you're going to have that I don't have. And that is fantastic. But at the end of the day, it comes to alignment. And whenever you hire a third-party vendor, there's always a question of alignment, which is they want to grow their business. I want to grow mine. And if me and my priorities get in the way of them growing their business, I will never be first on that priority list. Mm-hmm. And so from a quality control standpoint, that was important. So the most important thing to control the quality for us was the property and asset management. The second thing was the maintenance component. In our market, in our industry specifically, labor and skilled labor is such a necessity. If you don't have someone that can fix an HVAC unit, you're going to have hundreds of angry people calling your property management company, and you're not going to deliver a very good quality of service and product, and eventually your asset's going to fail because of that. And if you can't control that supply chain of labor, then you're always going to be second priority to whatever that vendor is. Mm-hmm. So we started property management, asset management immediately, and then we scaled into maintenance within 3 months of that. Yeah. And we spent the better part of a year working through those. And we had a lot of trials and tribulations. This doesn't work. We brought in what we thought were kind of, C-suite level folks that had been to the top of the mountain. And being at the top of the mountain and managing, 30, 40 people is very different than being a group of 3 and trying to get to 30 and 40. Mm-hmm. And we quickly learned that, that takes a very different mindset, a growth mindset of a startup company than just going and, paying a lot of money for a really high-end employee. So those were, some of the many challenges that we had to overcome. And then at the beginning of this year, we rolled out our vertical construction side to coincide with our horizontal development. And that was really, I think, the last piece of our vertical integration for VanRock. And from there, it's, it's allowed us to have from start to finish, from the moment we identify a project all the way through inception to completion and then management, to control every aspect of that vendor and that quality for both our investors, ourselves, and then also, at the end of the day, our tenants and our residents.
Mm-hmm.
For context there, what was that? How long ago was that day one where you and Stan showed up and said, all right, we're doing this?
It was 3 years ago in August, was our first.
Okay.
We had met about 6 months before that for coffee. And then from there, we started moving towards, what does this look like? At the same time, there had been a couple of things that had happened personally in my life. A couple of headhunters had come and approached me about leaving the firm a year before that. And that started really in my head the conversation of what is it that I want to do for the next 20 years. And so I was already thinking, what does that look like? And I got to the end of the line with one group, and we got there, and it's a family business. It's my brother and my father that I started the firm with. And so their position was, great, we would love for you to start in 3 weeks. And I was thinking, give me 9 months to roll everything up. And so once that kind of fizzled out, that was a good eye-opener that I wasn't just going to, leave. I had to put a plan together for an exit on one hand, what the company looks like after I leave on the firm side. So it gave Stan and I about 6 months to game plan and start putting some pieces in place. And then in August, we officially launched it, really with that in mind.
And so today, for an employee count, how many employees do y'all have in the organization?
Yeah, so we're right about 25 to 30 W-2 employees, and then we have a number of 1099. And so the 1099 component is probably the thing I'm most surprised and proud of. So WG Maintenance started off as a heavy labor-intensive maintenance company. And what we quickly saw was that didn't make sense because even though we controlled now the labor pool, we were not in alignment with the property management side, but also with the employees' goals. And we weren't getting the best quality work either from our W-2 folks. And then what we found when we switched it is we went to a 1099 model, which allowed some of our guys to work with us. If they wanted to, they could work exclusively with us and take service requests just from us. And let me back up. So what WG's main focus is it sits inside of our property management company, but also other property management companies now as well. If you manage 100 homes, rather than you going out and hiring a maintenance company and having to pay them, instead, we will sit inside your software, and when a maintenance request comes in, you can source it through us. We will handle all scheduling. We will handle all accounts payable and accounts receivable so that we are the go-between between property management and maintenance so that property managers can focus specifically on their owners and then their residents. And when we did that and we made that switch, we also had to switch to a 1099 model. And what we found was, again, in the alignment category, we had a 50% drop in who wanted to be a part of WG. And the 50% that stayed because they saw the value of, I'm going to have plenty of work. They're going to handle my scheduling. They're going to handle collections for me. I just need to do a good job, and you see it all the time in businesses, especially the service business. I want to do my job. I don't want to run a business. Mm-hmm. And so we have about 3 groups that were with us from the beginning. And I mean, every time they pull in and they stop by the office, there's another truck in the fleet. Now they have decals on the truck because they're a branded business. They're taking on more work. One gentleman went from an electrician to now he started a plumbing company and brought someone in because he's been able to scale. That was the most surprising, but one of the most beneficial things to see, which was we've created at least 10 different entrepreneurs and businesses that have now scaled. They now have employees from just WG. So while staying in alignment with, our core focus, which has been pretty cool.
And that's all locally in Greenville, South Carolina, or is that up in?
Yeah, so we run the 85 corridor. So we go as far north as Greensboro in North Carolina, and then as far south as we'll go past 85, but we'll go to Columbia and Aiken, South Carolina.
Yeah. Are there any certain services that you're looking for? Somebody listening to this that was, a tradesman looking to do their own thing, but don't want to necessarily worry about finding work and doing that?
If you are skilled trade, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, carpentry, we have plenty of work.
Yeah.
That is one of the benefits that I've seen, and one of the challenges is that we just grew so fast.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we would be successful. I had no idea how fast we would grow. And I think based on the conversation we had the other day, sometimes that growth is not always the best thing either. That indigestion conversation where, we've had to slow down on a couple of things where you want to continue to grow. You want to continue to take advantage of these opportunities because you're not sure how long they'll be here. But at the same time, those cause heartburn, to say the least. If there's a skilled trade looking to grow their business, we would love to help you do that.
I love it. And let's dive into that a little bit. So what Brian's talking about is the concept and the fact that most businesses, specifically startups, die of indigestion compared to lack of opportunity. And, when we first started working together, that was always one of my points with you guys was like, we are doing so much so quick. We have to control the complexity. Otherwise, the complexity is going to control us. Right?
Yeah.
And so maybe just let's weave some EOS into this now. Like you're starting to do this journey with Stan and you're building these things up. At what moment or ceiling did you hit or frustration level? Because usually there's a catalyst event of, most people that come to EOS are frustrated with people, lack of profit, lack of control, right? Is there a certain
spinning of wheels,
spinning of wheels?
Stuck, right?
Yeah.
What moment and how was you introduced to EOS?
So Stan took me to a mentorship conference in Nashville, Tennessee, when we had first started out. And at that moment in time, I had never heard of EOS. My father's background was he was an entrepreneur as well. I like to tell people he has a law degree, but he's really a business owner. So I was familiar with business and operations of business. But as far as like a playbook, I'd never heard of anything. I didn't, I went to school, I went political science and then law school where they do not teach you how to run a business at all. So those were just things that are just foreign to me and I was completely ignorant of. So we go to Nashville and, at one moment in time, I'm there with Stan and everybody in this room is extremely successful in real estate across the country, some of them outside of the country. There's not a person in there that you would not consider to be a successful person. And I get up there and I explain what VanRock is going to be. And I see eyes glass over. I see some people roll their eyes. And a number of people say, that is just too much. Mm-hmm. You're not going to be able to do this. And then one guy asked a very simple question, which is, what business operating system are you running? Operating system, I was thinking like Dell, Mac, like
Windows.
And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. And it was that moment of vulnerability where I just said, I don't know. I don't need to have the answer. And I think being a lawyer, sometimes you think you should have the answer to every question. And this was a clear, I have no idea what you mean. Please explain it. And I literally saw like 20 people pull out traction and they were all just walking around with it. And so I asked Stan, what is that? And he kind of explained what it was. So I bought the book. I read it twice, didn't understand it. Mm-hmm. And then Stan and I sat down and I said, if we are going to do this, we've got to hear the room. And the room is telling us this is way too much for us to do. And while we have a plan to get there, I don't know if we actually have a plan on how to get there. Mm-hmm. And that was our decision. So we read it a couple of times, went back and forth. And I told him, like, I don't know how to actually go through this. When you have a meeting and organize the meeting, that in and of itself is a job and a function. And so we talked to a couple of people in the group, and I think they referred us to someone who was outside of our market. And we had that call, and it was good. I just didn't feel comfortable having it necessarily be 100% remote while we were so young in the beginning. And I wanted more of a local, if I need to sit down with you and just have this conversation tomorrow, that's a possibility. And so that gentleman referred us to you. Mm-hmm. And so that was there was not a lot of resistance. There wasn't a failure that got us there. It was just a very clear, if you want to get there, then, all of those reservations, you got to just put it aside immediately and kind of eat the humble pie that you don't know everything if this is that important.
Yeah. And what a testament too, where I always say that EOS, and this is my experience too, isn't going to solve your problems. It's not going to magically get you from A to Z, but it gives you the structure to see the things, make decisions as a group, be decisive in that moment. That is going to take you from the first step to the second step. And then once you get to the second step, same thing over again and take you to the third step.
Yeah.
And so it creates this cadence for us of this dynamic to make those decisions within, for sure. So when we did that, we first met, we had Stan sit more in the visionary seat, and then you sit more in the integrator seat.
Yeah.
How'd that go?
In the beginning, it went terribly, but I also don't think we knew how bad it was going.
Yeah.
Because we were trying to just, every day there was something we were trying to solve to get to the next day, essentially.
Yeah.
So at the same time, it was interesting because I was having conversations with Stan while I was running the day-to-day for property management, asset management, and maintenance. I was having conversations with Stan about 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, things that we should be thinking about, planning ahead. And he was having conversations to me on KPIs of yesterday and today. And, it took us getting into a room and sitting down, and he is very much, thinks in days, weeks, and sometimes months, and I'm months, years. And that mindset right there, I think doesn't make sense in the roles that we were at. And so, like I said, I don't think we knew how bad it was until we made that switch. And then, Stan threw a wrench into it where we had about 3 months of it going really well after we made the switch, and then Stan moved. And for family reasons, and it was a conversation we had way in advance. It wasn't a surprise, but that day came a lot faster than we expected. And so now he was running the day-to-day operations remotely, which was, not something I could ever do. And it was amazing to see how he did it. But there was a moment, I think we took maybe 1 or 2 months when he first moved, where I stepped in, took over day-to-day operations while he got settled. And again, we plateaued again, and then he took over day-to-day, and we jumped up again, which was really, profound for me, and just how good at his role he is.
And on that, just listen to you talking about the early vision, and you're telling your story, and a room full of people are like, "Whoa, wait, that's way too complicated." Yeah. And then what I heard is you didn't compromise the vision. You said, "All right, let's find a framework that helps us execute on the vision." Right? At no point did you say, or did I hear you say, "We're not going to do that. We're just going to do one thing at a time, and we're going to grow this thing slowly." So I think that's a very keen, that's a visionary's role, right?
For sure.
Is to actually say, like, this is where we're going. So we just got to figure out the how now.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a fly on the wall in some meetings, and I've seen people pitch, and I've seen people present something that they care deeply about, and they've put so much time in. And the minute they get any criticism, it becomes this very personal, and everything that they're hearing now everything the person is saying is not being heard. And I just committed to myself that I wasn't going to do that. If I'm going to pay the money, I'm going to fly to Nashville, I'm going to stand in front of these people, and I'm going to acknowledge that they're successful in something that I want to be successful in, then I should hear what they have to say. And I just never thought of it like that, as far as, well, they're telling you you can't be successful, or this is too much, you should quit. It was more, they're telling you that there's holes in your plan.
Yep.
You need to fix those. And so, I just, I never really dwelled too much on that side of it.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to go back a little bit. You talked a lot about the why, right? Why we're doing this, where we want to go, setting that vision, not just for the organization, but for you as owners as well. And we've spent a lot of time on that because that one basic question really helped us set what needs to be done today. And so maybe from your perspective, has there been any value in the EOS cadence of quarterly meetings that has allowed you to continually open that conversation and craft the decisions today based off of the why and the long-term vision?
Yeah, I mean, first, I think EOS, once you kind of unpack, here's the thing I think that is interesting about traction. I would say that 60 to 75% of the book is convincing you to follow the other 25% of the book. Whereas if you could just strip out that 25% and say, I'm in, you could probably get through it much easier and have that operations. But I understand that you have to sell the case of it. With that being said, the simplicity of it, if I was going to run a marathon today, and it would be harder today every day because I get a lot older with kids, but if I was going to run a marathon today and I gave myself 90 days and I committed to it, I could run that marathon in 90 days. I might not be able to run 180 days from now, though, because on the 91st day, I'm done. I'm not getting up. And so from a day 91 to day 180, it's over. And I think you see that in life all the time, with our health or personal lives or anything else. We can do anything for 90 days and we can see significant results, and then you fall off, right? And then now you have to go and restart that whole thing again. I think the beauty of EOS is the simplicity in that if you go day 1 to 90 and you meet, you're not going to walk out of there without another 90 days of planning. And you've already forgotten, you forgot about the marathon you just ran, and now you're getting ready for the next one. And I think that's just a simple thing that it does in the cadence that just sets you up for success, because everything gets in between those 90.
100%. Yeah. One thing that we struggled with your implementation was the L10 schedules. We had at the time 4 or 5 different entities. We're trying to run different L10s with 1 or 2 of the same people running those functions, either Bryan or Stan, right? We didn't really have operators in those functions yet. So maybe walk through like your learnings of practical implementation for your business model of some of the meeting cadences. What didn't work in the L10s? Where are you landing today?
Yeah, because we had, different companies that are meant to be standalone companies and operate on their own P&L and balance sheet and be their own success, they are aligned from the focus of VanRock, but at the same time, the core operators are different. And so when we started, we started with 6, 7, 8 people. And so we try to do the L10 as the entire organization.
Yeah, where we would have a head of each individual entity.
Yeah, and what you got is for an hour or to an hour and a half, we had maybe 20 to 30 minutes max applicable to one of the organizations or folks. So you're just sitting there, and at that point in time, you have to recognize that I'm just wasting this other person's time now so that they're here when I want them to be here from a meeting standpoint. And so that was, when we made that shift, we moved it to almost like micro L10s with each organization. We weren't, one of the things, I'm not a big advocate of remote work, but it worked out really well here because Stan was remote. It was easy for him to go from 9 to 10:30 and go into a Teams call with every single group and, shrink kind of the L10 to specify that one group. And then what we've seen now is as we've continued to have success, our company has grown. And so now our property management company has its own L10 standalone, which takes the entire time. And same thing with some of the other companies as they've grown. But that was, we had to get to the growth to make sense. But that was our way of working through the problem.
Yeah, and it's unique. Even how we do quarterly planning is fairly unique where we'll do the ownership full day quarterly planning like traditional. But then we do a second day where we have micro quarterly plans with each entity. And we just found that this last time there's a certain group that's grown enough, they have enough of the structure in place where we need to expand that for them. So it's this getting things in place in each one, creating that structure, and then we can expand out, put more of a traditional implementation into each one.
Yeah.
I'd be curious from a core values perspective, what from kind of a single VTO for tip of the spear for one organization, you've got multiple organizations, what rolls up to, the single VTO
This
and
is a
our
really good
values
question.
share,
Yeah.
or does that kind of start to take on values of their own?
As of today, we have a core values that applies to every organization. It's the same mantra. We laugh about it. No BS is our first one. Straightforward talk. And I think for a couple of reasons. One is we don't have time to sugarcoat things. We're running so fast. If I have to worry or you have to worry about my feelings in a certain standpoint, just give me the facts and let's handle it. And I think that's been a natural filter for our company where we've had to but we've kept it across the board. And I think the core values will stay as they are because the folks that we've seen kind of rise to the top and take over operational roles, I think that they consume those core values, if not as much or more than we do. And the accountability component that comes with that, I think they like. And I think that's been an interesting thing. Going back to, certain things I just didn't know when I started this. I did not know how there's, certain folks that if you create accountability for them, they will crave it and they will excel at it and they will exceed it. And that will be a driver to them more than some other things. And then you have other folks where if you create any accountability, they are out the door immediately. And so just by creating accountability, we could filter out, who we really didn't want there to begin with. And I didn't want to go through a 6-month process of us going back and forth just to get to the same result. And now on the hiring side, we've tried to create some of those, we put our core values in every job description at the top because I think it filters folks from applying.
How do you manage the, in a scaling of an organization, adding new headcount, that idea of takes 7 times for things to really sink in, right? So you've got people who've now heard it 70 times and you've got someone hearing it for the first time, right? How do you manage that, adding new people to the team and keeping the continuity with the tenured people?
Yeah, so I think there's a little bit of a train the trainer process that's going on in the beginning unintentionally, but now intentionally, where we have folks that have operational roles and have management roles that buy in 100% to what we're trying to do and achieve, that they now are taking over a lot of that reiteration of kind of where we're going, why we're doing this. And they've bought in, and by them buying in, it's allowed us to scale. So I think that has been a very, I think the core values created that system.
Yeah.
And us, I think you could say it sounds corny, and sometimes when I say it out loud, it does. But we literally took our core values and we put it on poster board. At the beginning, we used a marker and wrote it on poster board and then stuck it up on the wall. And I would see people walk into our office and just kind of look and at it like, that's a little cheesy. And we've graduated to now printed poster board.
It's like the Believe and Ted Lasso.
Bedazzled.
But I've also seen our employees walk in and look at it every single day. And I think that creates a culture. And the culture, I think, then precipitates itself across everything else.
That's awesome. So did you find that was there intentionality in that, or did it just naturally happen? As far as extending that and getting people bought into it, I mean, did they grab hold of it and it just the process worked, or did you have to make any specific intentional things?
I would say that we were very intentional.
Okay.
In the beginning, we were not. In the beginning, we were hiring based on resume, as opposed to now we're hiring more and so based on core values. And we've hired folks that have 0 experience now and that have moved to management level very quickly and done very well because of who they are as a person, as opposed to what their experience that they brought to it. So So I think it's been intentional. I think it's also been, we're competing for the same pool of labor as everybody else, which means sometimes, if everybody's going here and you are willing to reach out and train someone, you might get someone better. And I think that's what we've found. I'm not a big Patriots fan, but when the Patriots were very good, they could essentially pull anybody into their organization and that person was going to be successful because the organization was successful. Whereas at the same time, nothing against, the Oakland Raiders at the time. You sent someone there, they were going to get a nice check and a losing record. Didn't matter how much money you paid them. Mm-hmm. I think that mentality for us is something that we continue to foster. And it's easy to forget about the importance of it because it's not right in your face. It's not mm-hmm. a KPI. It's not a daily thing. It's this overall thing that you kind of feel and see, but you can kind of lose track of, which is why I think the 90 days, again, creates that simplicity to always get back to center.
There's a couple of things. One is this idea of a lot of people maybe not understand the value of high accountability and high trust, that they can live together. And I look at a sports mentality all the time. Some of the most accountable teams out there are sports teams. There's accountability every quarter, at the end of every game, at the end of every season, at the end of every play. There's accountability on, did we do our role, did we do our job or not?
Yeah.
And they're some of the most highly trusting cultures as well. And so, something that we are in the middle of talking about at VanRock is the cultural aspect of high accountability, high trust, as far as we have these different entities that have to perform, but we also have this overall feel of VanRock that we're all part of. And how do we culturally make that work, right? From we're all here, we're looking at one scorecard, and one scoreboard of at the end of the day, we win or we lose together as a team, to ultimately they are different entities and one is even a client of another. Mm-hmm. So there's these natural divisions as well, more than what a typical two functions would be. And so I think that there's this dynamic that we're working through.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be a constant needs attention because I'm a believer that culture left alone turns bad. Culture, if you don't actively work to get better and you just say, oh, it's perfect, don't touch it, it will turn negative. We have to constantly work on it. So it's just really interesting, in our dynamic of where we're at and where we're building to go. So it gets me to a question about what is a lesson that you're in the middle of learning right now? And that can be personal, it can be organizational. Well, what's a lesson you're in the middle of currently?
I'll use the one that we've gone through, and I think it goes back to that. I look at VanRock as an entire organization, but at the same time, there is incentives individually for employees. If you're part of essentially one team or one standalone company, you are incentivized to grow that company. And so the lesson that we're going through right now is, it's almost like we have this child and we've nurtured this child and everything's going great. And now they want to go out into the world and I want them to stay at home. Mm-hmm. Just be ours. Don't do third-party work. Stay here with VanRock. And they're saying to me, we want to do this. We want to take the success we have and we want to go out there because A, it enriches our lives personally. But B, we can take market share and start competing with other property management companies, asset management companies. And that's because I'm very, very culture focused and I want it to be ours. And I also don't want to ever get to the point where your alignment is not my alignment. Mm-hmm. This is why we started this. Mm-hmm. So that is a very interesting dynamic that we are going through right now on how do we set it up for you can go and you can do these things while at the same time our mantra of VanRock and growing that side of it isn't going to lack. For better words. And I think we've come up with some solutions for that, intercompany side that, folks need to be incentivized to grow the third-party business, and those folks probably don't need to have a day-to-day role on the VanRock side so that I'm never competing with your time. Mm-hmm. If you want to go and service clients, then we'll have a platform for you to do that and grow it. But at the same time, those clients will never have to wonder, if I call or if they call, whose phone you're going to pick up. So you don't have to worry about my call. You can worry about the clients because they need to come first. So that's what we're going through right now, and that has been a personal lesson for me, in that not always are the things that I think are the most important to our team. And going back to our core values, that I asked them the question, they answered it very, very frankly, which was good because now we can problem solve and we can get back on center as far as where we're going.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. When you look towards the future, right? Like where do you see VanRock in a year? How do you see EOS part of that journey? Are there any things that really kind of comes up, whether it may be challenges we need to face as we go forward, or something that you're really excited about?
Well, I'm certainly excited about the growth of VanRock. I mean, our business model is predicated on really the business thesis that the 85 corridor and then Greenville-Spartanburg specifically are going to see tremendous growth over the next 5 years, and that we are going to be an integral part of that when it comes to housing, both for sale and for rent housing, and all facets that surrounds. That's our thesis, and that's everything else is buffering that. I think that'll continue to play out. I think right now, I haven't seen any signs that is incorrect.
Yeah.
If anything, I think that we've been a little bit conservative on that. So I would say over the next 3 years, that growth, what I'd really like to see in 3 years from now is us to have a significant market share in the single family and for rent side of things. And our niche is what we consider to be infill. So you go see a site and there's 200 homes going in by a national home builder. That is not our market. Our market is, in the city of Spartanburg and Greenville and some of the municipalities where 20, 30 units for sale and for rent, you'll see our signs. That I think is an underserved area of the market, specifically here. I think we'll continue to service that.
Yeah, and you just opened a new fund, right? You're looking to
did.
fill as well too. So, any investors out there?
Yeah, it's a lofty. I think we'll hit it actually at this point in time. When I say it's lofty because every time I write down what we're trying to do, I go back to that same conversation. Like, is this too much? And then every time someone says, "Yeah, that makes sense," I'm in. It's always this, both surprising and rewarding at the same time that it's making sense. So yeah, so we think that we can raise a significant amount of money and deploy it in Greenville and Spartanburg over the next 3 years, and more than likely, if our area goes in the same way as Charlotte and Atlanta, you will start to see Wall Street and institutional money come in, which most likely means prices on everything else is going to increase dramatically. So our intent is to have a foothold here before that happens.
What kind of closing question? There's lots of people who may have just read the back of the book. There's people who've read the book. There's people who are trying to implement. But for someone who's considering, committing to EOS with their organization, what advice would you give them?
I'd do it because it's the only thing you risk is time, right? So either you either bring someone in to do it or you try to do it yourself. And the worst case scenario is that you are going to do it wrong. And that 90-day meeting and the L10 are not going to be the most efficient and most optimal. Guaranteed they're going to be better than not having the meeting. And so it'd be like going to the gym. At least you're at the gym, right? You've stepped one, you've at least gotten there. So that would be my suggestion anyway, is just do it.
Just get started. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Bryan, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank
Andrew,
you.
thank you. This has been awesome.
Absolutely.
I think this is one we're going to have to do like every 2 quarters, right?
I know, every 6 months. Where are we at now?
Because it's very exciting, man. It's awesome that you have not conceded on your vision and that you are executing on it. I commend you on that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome.
It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.